Hello, my friends. It's Wednesday, April 2nd, 2025, and I'm your host, Radical Russ Belville, your Red State refugee. And welcome to the Radical Russ Show, coming to you from Rolla J Studios in my undisclosed mountain hideaway in the beautiful state of Jefferson region of Southern Oregon. Well, it's a great day for a show today. Some good news on the electoral front as Susan Crawford has won big in the Wisconsin Supreme Court race. We'll give you all the latest information and how this bodes well for Democrats as we move toward the 2026 midterms. We've also got Cory Booker, the senator from New Jersey, breaking the record for the longest floor speech in Senate history and breaking the record of a man whose record deserved to be broken. We'll give you all the details on that. We also have another update in the whiskey leaks or the security gaffes or whatever the hell we're going to call this continuingly ongoing and growing security scandal featuring Mike Waltz and some of the other national security principals. I don't know how far this is going to go, but we'll take a look. We'll also give you an update on the disappearance of Mr. Abrego Garcia, the El Salvadoran man who had legal protection to not be deported. A court had actually said, do not deport this guy. He got deported anyway. We'll give you Stephen Miller's reaction and a great reaction from Ken White, a.k.a. Pope Hat Online. Today, April 2nd, also is so-called Liberation Day, according to Orange Cheeto Mussolini, who is going to announce at 4 Eastern today a new round of reciprocal tariffs against most of our trading partners. I sure hope you've cashed in your 401k, folks, because the market is not going to like this. We've got our usual Boycott Idaho segment. We got an update on that health freedom bill that would have allowed businesses and schools, or would have refuse the right of business and schools to ban people who are sick or require any sort of vaccinations. We'll tell you the update on that, plus another update on medical procedures law going on with a couple of new laws in the state of Idaho that allow healthcare providers to discriminate. And then at the end of the show, we'll have time for a radical rant. Well, I'll give you my thoughts on why it is critical as we move forward as a party to get God out of our government. All that's coming up today on the Radical Russ Show. But before we get into the main news topics, let's talk a little entertainment, because we lost a great one yesterday as the announcement of the death of actor Val Kilmer at age 65 from pneumonia. I grew up, of course, watching the great Val Kilmer movies, starting with Real Genius, which was one of my favorites. A lot of folks will remember him for his portrayal of Iceman in Top Gun. He was great in Willow. I loved the movie Top Secret, the satire of the old Elvis musicals. He was great in that. And probably, I think, his best role that showcased his acting chops was as Doc Holliday in Tombstone. What a great movie that was. And my favorite, I loved him as Jim Morrison in The Doors. I thought he really brought the Lizard King to life in that film. So if you get the chance, get onto one of your favorite movie streaming sites, pick out a Val Kilmer movie or two, and let's remember one of the great ones. The big story this morning is the victory by liberal Dane County jurist Susan Crawford, winning the open seat on the Wisconsin Supreme Court to keep the 4-3 liberal tilt of that court. And folks, it wasn't even close. The latest numbers I've seen have her coming in with a 55-45 win against Republican-backed candidate Brad Schimel, a 10-point margin in the state of Wisconsin. Let's go to her victory speech and hear a little from Susan Crawford.
But I've got to tell you, as a little girl growing up in Chippewa Falls, I never could have imagined that I'd be taking on the richest man in the world. For justice in Wisconsin. And we won. I've spent my whole career fighting for Wisconsin as a prosecutor, a lawyer, a judge, and now a soon-to-be justice on the Wisconsin Supreme Court. Standing up for our fundamental rights and freedoms, protecting Wisconsin families and communities. My promise to Wisconsin is clear. I will be a fair, impartial, and common sense justice on the Wisconsin Supreme Court. So today, Wisconsinites fended off an unprecedented attack on our democracy. That's right. Our fair elections and our Supreme Court. And Wisconsins stood up and said loudly that justice does not have a price. Our courts are not for sale.
That's Susan Crawford winning her seat in the Wisconsin Supreme Court, fending off $20 million that was pumped into this election by Elon Musk and the very anti-democratic moves he made of bribing voters with these $20 per tweet and $100 per thumbs up picture, and two people actually getting $1 million checks. Two $1 million checks being handed out to try to sway the vote, and it did not work. And furthermore, I believe that it backfired. I believe this might have been a closer election had not Elon Musk tried to put his thumb on the scales. I think the people of Wisconsin recognize this for the anti-democratic oligarchic grab that it was and rejected it out of hand. And looking at the results from all across Wisconsin, every county in Wisconsin shifted blue in this vote compared to their 2024 election votes for Donald Trump. Donald Trump won that state by 8 points. Susan Crawford won her election by 10 points, an 18-point swing in the state of Wisconsin. And looking at a couple of the other elections that happened yesterday, there were two special elections in Florida for House seats. Now, the bad news is the Republicans won both of them. And the media is trying to portray this as big wins for the Republicans because they won by 8 or 9 or 10 points, something like that. But the real news here is, again, the blue shift that has happened in those two districts. Both of those Florida districts were big double-digit Trump wins in 2024. The Democrats in those races managed to cut those margins down to single digits. You know that the GOP must be afraid of the elections on the horizon. They pulled the nomination of Elise Stefanik, the representative from New York. She was to be the UN ambassador. They pulled that nomination because they feared having that seat open and losing that seat in New York to a Democratic challenger. So yes, the Republicans did add 2 more to their House margin, which I now believe is standing at 5. I could be wrong on that, but it's still a narrow margin, and the results in Wisconsin and Florida do not bode well for the electoral chances coming up in the midterms. Everything Trump touches dies. That includes Elon Musk, and now Elon Musk has spread that to the Wisconsin Supreme Court race. Everything Trump touches dies. I hope you all got some chance to catch Senator Cory Booker in his marathon floor speech yesterday. He lasted 25 hours and 4 minutes. 25 hours, 4 minutes, setting the record for the longest floor speech ever. And I do want to make a correction for some of the people out there reporting this. It's not the longest filibuster ever, because this was not a filibuster. It's the longest floor speech. Every filibuster is a floor speech, but not all floor speeches are filibusters. Now, the record he broke was held by Strom Thurmond, who was engaged in a filibuster. Strom Thurmond went 24 hours and a few minutes, I think 8, something like that. all the way back in 1957 when he filibustered the 1957 Civil Rights Act. And if you don't know about Strom Thurmond, he was one of the most odious racist segregationists in the U.S. Senate. He served until 2003, I believe, if my memory serves correctly. He was one of the longest serving senators, a rabid racist segregationist who tried to filibuster the Civil Rights Act of 1957. It is so good to see Cory Booker breaking that record. And a couple other notes about breaking that record of Strom Thurmond's. When Thurmond did his filibuster, he was allowed restroom breaks. He was allowed to go out and use the restroom. Cory Booker did not use the restroom at all. I have to correct myself from yesterday. I misreported this when it was first going. I said others were taking some questions to allow him to go have restroom breaks. No, that wasn't it at all. He didn't take a single break. How did he manage that? He wasn't wearing Depends, folks. He wasn't pulling a Trump. No, what he did, he began a fast on Friday. He stopped eating his last meal on Friday, and he stopped drinking liquids on Sunday in order to last 25 hours without needing a bathroom break. So not only did he give this speech for 25 hours, he did so hungry and thirsty. Amazing. And when Strom Thurmond did his little filibuster back in the 50s, he wasn't really giving a speech. He was just trying to waste time, trying to delay the Senate from passing that law. So he was up there reading the encyclopedia at times. Similar thing happened when Ted Cruz tried to do his filibuster a while back, and he was reading from Dr. Seuss's Green Eggs and Ham. Not the case with Cory Booker. This man gave a cogent, intelligent speech with an overarching narrative for 25 hours. You could literally go back to the C-SPAN archives, pick out any hour within there, and just click into the middle of it and start listening. And it's going to be relevant. It's going to be something that's going to grab your attention. This is going to go down in history as one of the greatest oratories in our democracy, if we manage to keep it. This will be studied by historians for years, and I'm sure you've seen lots of the clips going around on YouTube and the various social media. I just want to give you the one at the very end. This is the very end of the 25 hours where Cory Booker is finally wrapping up the speech.
Our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. We need that now from all Americans. This is a moral moment. It's not left or right, it's right or wrong. Let's get in good trouble. My friend, Madam President, I yield the floor.
At this point, there were so many senators and representatives in the chambers who knew that he was getting ready to break the record. The place is virtually filled. A standing ovation. Great work by Senator Cory Booker. And another couple of updates, right after he finished this, it was kind of a letdown for me, but I after thinking about it for a day, I'm not so let down. But at the time, it kind of bummed me out. I'm sitting there listening to that where he ends the speech and there's the big, massive ovation for him. And then eventually the president pro tem gavels the Senate to order. And the senator from Idaho stands up, and I couldn't tell if it was Risch or Crapo. They stand up and say, "Are we moving on with regular business, Madam President?" "Yes, we're moving on with regular business." "All right, we're moving on for the nomination of Matthew Whitaker to NATO ambassador. I ask for unanimous consent." And the Senate pro tem says, "Unanimous consent, no objections." I'm like, what? We went through that entire 25 hours. The whole point of which is to be sand in the gears, to throw our bodies on the line, to try to gum up the Senate. And the very next thing that happens is exactly the sort of thing we're telling them not to do. Do not give unanimous consent anymore. We know that this Matthew Whitaker being nominated to be ambassador to NATO is going to go in there to try to mess it up. That's everybody that Trump has nominated. Their number one job is to go into that agency and do what you can to destroy it. So we know he's no good. So don't give unanimous consent. No more unanimous consent. Force them to take a vote on everything. At least that's how I felt yesterday. But then I'm reading some of the social media posts and folks are saying, maybe keep the powder dry on that. Once we go nuclear on unanimous consent, it's going to be a massive shit show in the Senate with repercussions. So maybe keep the powder dry for someone like Matthew Whitaker, NATO ambassador, and hold it for something more important. I don't know what the strategy is here, but I would like to see more gumming up the works from our Senate Democrats. Also, if it hasn't become clear that it's time for Chuck Schumer to go and be replaced by Cory Booker, I think he made a pretty good case for himself in this speech. And Schumer there, when it got to about the 24-hour mark, when it was about the point of time when he was going to break Strom Thurmond's record, he tried to interrupt Cory Booker saying, we yield the floor. And Cory Booker says, this is the one time I can say no to Chuck Schumer. But Schumer barged ahead anyway to say, did you know you passed Strom Thurmond and you've set the record? We're so proud of you. We're so proud of you. Chuck just stepping all over his dick here, trying to reassert himself as the leader, kind of playing this pat him on the head. Oh, you're a good follower. Thanks for making us look good, us Democrats. And I think people saw through it. I hope people saw through it. Recognize Chuck's trying to steal some of the spotlight there. I don't think his days as minority leader are much longer, but we'll see if the Democrats can pull around this. One other update on this, too. I see a lot of people out there reporting on Cory Booker's speech, and they keep spelling his first name wrong. They keep spelling it Corey. It's not, there's no E in Cory for Cory Booker. There is an E for Corey Haim. There is an E for Corey Feldman. There is an E for Corey Hart. Hell, there's even an E for Corey Lewandowski. So if you're having trouble remembering, here's how you remember. The E in Cory stands for white dude. More disturbing revelations coming out about our national insecurity, I guess we should call it, since it seems nobody in the Trump-Mal administration understands about keeping our records secret, about conducting business through secure channels. We've already been through all the details in Whiskey Leaks, where they were conducting war plans, battle plans, attack plans, depending on what you want to call it, through Signal, an encrypted over-the-shelf app on unsecure phones. I guess the phones aren't insecure. They probably feel okay about themselves. Anyway, unsecure phones. Well, now the latest revelation. Let's not also forget Pete Hegseth taking his wife to work. Take your wife to work today, taking to important Pentagon meetings, discussing classified material that she should have no business discussing. Or hiring his brother, not his son, his brother, to work at the Pentagon. His prior experience is he ran a podcast company. Yeah, he ran a podcast company. And before that, he was a podcaster. So good news, folks. I'm now eligible to work at the highest levels of the Pentagon. I have all the experience necessary. Yay for me. But now the latest revelation to get to here. There's so many. Mike Waltz, the national security advisor to the president, has been revealed to be conducting official business over Gmail. Gmail. Publicly available Gmail. Unsecured, unencrypted Gmail. My God. This is just the gang that can't shoot straight. Or at least secretly. What's next? Next week we're going to find out Mike Waltz was recruiting spies through Backpage. He was putting classified ads on Backpage. Yeah, that's it. Who knows? Next month, Mike Waltz revealed to be issuing secret attack data on the bathroom wall at Sal's Bar and Grill on K Street. That's how low can this go? We were sending smoke signals. My God, this is just the utter dereliction of duty. And it's just amazing to me, the restraint of our military leaders. God bless them for not getting into the politicization of this. But they got to know, the generals got to know, this is endangering our troops. This is endangering our spies. We've got to assume now that China, that North Korea, Iran, Russia, any of our enemies out there now have full and open access to all of our nation's secrets. They're not dumb. They know how to hack this stuff. Boy, and the leaks that are coming out here, the leaks here about Mike Waltz, who knows what he's going to leak about Hegseth next. It really seems to me that behind the scenes, we've got a civil war going on amongst these national security principles where Mike Waltz is trying to avoid being the scapegoat, trying to get Pete Hegseth fired. Hegseth is trying to get Mike Waltz fired, so he's not paid attention to. And meanwhile, I don't think Trump is ever going to fire either of them. I think he likes the situation just as it is. Keep all the people below him nervous and worried about each other. He doesn't have to worry about them usurping him. The story of the disappearance of Mr. Abrego Garcia, the El Salvadoran man who was caught up in an administrative error and deported to our El Salvadoran concentration camp. The administration saying now that he's in El Salvador, U.S. courts have no jurisdiction to get him back, which we know is a bit of bullshit, because if the U.S. government can contract with El Salvador to hold all these prisoners in concentration camps down there, they certainly have enough leverage, if they felt like it, to get this man out. They certainly have the leverage to do so, but, that would be a bother. That would be a real pain in the ass, and furthermore, they don't want to. They don't want to bring him back. Stephen Miller, the ghoul advisor to Trump, Stephen Miller posted that the people who illegally invade our country are only entitled to the due process of being deported. That's their due process. If they illegally invaded, their due process is being deported. That's not how it works. We do not trust the government to just tell us that somebody's bad and therefore they should be deported. As it is obvious in this case, the courts had already established he was not to be deported. He already had a legal ruling forbidding his deportation. So we're not following due process at all. And as I explained on a previous episode, the due process they had for picking up the alleged gang members from Venezuela was, number one, are you Venezuelan? Number two, do you have tattoos? And that's it. That was the due process. An ICE agent sees that you have tattoos and a Venezuelan background. You're on the bus, you're in the shackles, you're on the plane, you're at the concentration camp. That's your due process. This is the sickest, most disgusting violation of our rights. Not just Mr. Abrego Garcia's rights, our rights. Ken White is a lawyer who posts on social media as Popat, who breaks it down pretty easy to understand. You can find him at kenwhite.bsky.social on Blue Sky. And I just want to read you his thread. The government's statement is a flex, not a confession of error. The important elements of the flex are these. 1. We send enemies to brutal foreign labor camps. 2. We decide who enemies are. 3. We decide you are an enemy based on a secret informant or our view of your tattoos. 4. Our decision that you are an enemy is not subject to question or review. 5. In fact, it is unpatriotic and offensive to question our determination. Are you an enemy? 6. Also, the questioning is irrelevant because once the enemy is sent to a brutal foreign labor camp, they're outside the law. 7. Our sovereign privilege to do these things is inherent in American government. So who is to blame? Responsibility is not a zero-sum game. The Trump administration bears blame for taking advantage of the opportunity, but the people of America gave the administration the opportunity to by promoting a culture of cop hero worship, a culture that accepts that the other is outside the law, whomsoever the state decides the other is, and that the other is the enemy, that foreigners are intrinsically scary and evil. Put another way, this is on Americans, not just the people who lead them. A truly freedom-loving people would not endure this and would not have developed a political culture so encrusted with servile deference to authority that permits it. A free people would find it revolting. Certainly, the people who openly thirst for this sort of lawless thuggery and brutality are to blame, but so are the people who are indifferent. Shaw said, quote, "The worst sin toward our fellow creatures is not to hate them, but to be indifferent to them. That's the essence of inhumanity." End quote. The overtly malign, empowered by the indifferent, may doom the American experiment. Absolutely. So well written. How many times you turn on TV, you see NCIS, you see FBI, you see CSI, any of these propaganda shows where they got the bad guy and they've got him in the interrogation chamber and they're roughing him up. They're going outside the lines. They're pushing hard to make sure he confesses. They're violating his civil rights. And those cops are portrayed as the heroes. They're the good guys, the ones who'll go around the system to make sure they get their guy. We have been inculcated in this propaganda since 1 Adam 12, see the man. 50 years. Hell, go before that, Dragnet. 60 years. 60 years of our television and our movies portraying cops as these unsung heroes of strong moral character who never make a mistake. They always get their man. Of course he's a bad guy. Of course he doesn't deserve any rights. Of course we can rough him up. And also you'll see in those propaganda shows the defense attorneys being portrayed as weasels, slimy, ambulance chasers, trying to get bad guys off. Think very strongly about how we are propagandized in this country. Because Ken White is right. It should never have gotten to this point. It should have been so politically toxic to try to round people up and lock them up, no matter what their color, no matter what their national origin. This should have been so revolting and offensive that it would be political suicide to even broach the subject, much less round up guys based on their tattoos and their skin color and national origin and shipping them overseas to concentration camps. Folks, the fascism is here. I don't know what you expected it to look like. We are disappearing people off the streets without due process. We are capturing people based on their social media posts that don't like the government or are supportive foreign policies. So much for free speech, so much for petitioning your government for a redress of grievances, so much for being secure in your person's houses, papers, and effects, so much for not being forced to incriminate oneself, so much for being entitled to a speedy jury trial and to have the assistance of counsel, so much for the prevention of cruel and unusual punishment. That's what America's all about, is due process. That's why we put this country together. We didn't like being subject to the whims and dictates of a king who could just decide someone's an enemy and off with their head. We have due process for the worst of the worst. I want the worst pedophile, sex trafficking, fraudster, criminal, murderer, terrorist to have the best possible lawyer, to have their day in court, to have all the evidence provided for and against them. I think no matter how heinous someone is, no matter how much damage they've done, no matter how much evidence, you can have them on videotape. You could have 1,000 witnesses that saw them do it live, and I would still support due process for that person. Even if that person's name was Donald John Trump. Well, later today, Orange Cheeto Mussolini is going to appear before the cameras and announce Liberation Day. This is the day he's announcing a new round of tariffs, reciprocal tariffs, blanket tariffs, tariffs, that he thinks is going to liberate the American consumer and lead to American prosperity, despite the fact that every single human being on the planet who's ever studied a history book of the Great Depression, every single economist out there who has ever studied the issue can tell you this is going to lead to depression. This is going to lead to inflation. This is going to be a huge problem for the American people. So huge a problem, that we've managed to drive two of our allies into the arms of our greatest adversary. It was announced yesterday that the governments of China, South Korea, and Japan will be working together, coordinating their responses to Trump's tariffs. South Korea and Japan now are allied with China. We are so isolating ourselves on the world stage. And of course, Trump said he couldn't care less. He couldn't care less if the prices go up. He couldn't care less that a car's price could go up from $6,000 or $8,000 in the next few months. He couldn't care less. He doesn't care about the high prices. He ran on, I will lower prices on day one, and now he couldn't care less. And the MAGAs are trying to go along with him. Oh, yeah, it'll be some short-term pain. It'll be some short-term pain for long-term gain. Yeah, short-term. Short-term, like trying to get American manufacturing processes up to completely cut out the foreign supply chains. Yeah, that'll happen real quick. The estimates I've seen 2, 3, 4 years to be able to make that happen. In the meantime, massive recession or depression, unaffordable cars, unaffordable parts. It's crazy. It's crazy talk, people. So that's coming up later today. And Cory Booker, in his epic speech, had something to say about it.
I just feel that Trump mocks us. What does his Liberation Day mean to the people that are shackled to debt? From medical debt, that are shackled with student debt, that can't afford the rising costs of groceries. What's his liberation mean? To people who are chained by fear right now, waiting with bated breath to see if the Medicaid programs they rely on are going to be cut. What does his liberation mean? To people who are literally in jails right now because they were disappeared from our streets. What does his liberation mean to people who can't afford homes because of his tariffs, who dreamed of a new car, but that's going to go up as well? I don't know what he means by liberation. I honestly don't. I wish he'd explain it to the American people. Who's liberated in this financial times? Who's liberated? I don't think the law firms feel liberated, that we're so threatened by you that they felt the only way they could get from under the threat of you is to come to you and beg them and offer them and say we'll do this and say we'll give you millions of dollars of pro bono worth. I don't think they feel liberated. What about the people that are banned from the press corps because they won't call it the Gulf of America? the idea of the press, the freedom of the press, do they feel his liberty? What does his liberty mean? What does Donald Trump's Liberty Day tomorrow mean?
That's Cory Booker questioning the liberation being offered. How will we be liberated when Medicaid is cut? Senator Bill Cassidy, maybe you have something to offer on this?
Let's bring that approach not to just what DOGE is doing, discretionary spending, but let's look at Medicare. Is there some way that we can cut Medicare so that reform Medicare so that benefits stay the same, but that it's less expensive, more efficient? I would say that there is, and that's where our opportunity lies.
Oops. Did I say cut Medicare? No, not cut. Oh, no, not cut. Reform. We're going to reform Medicare. Yeah, we're going to make it so you get all the same benefits you've got now, but then we don't put as much money into it, and somehow it's all magically going to work out. Everything will be just fine. Liberation Day. Insane here. And speaking of the companies out there and the threats being made to them by Trump, Cory Booker mentioned some of the law firms, but also some of the corporations out there have been threatened by Trump and his DEI purge. Corporations threaten they need to get rid of their DEI. They need to go back to merit-based hiring, which is such a con. Because what DEI was all about in the first place was making sure we could do merit-based hiring by not leaving out the black people who have merit, and the brown people who have merit, and the gay people who have merit, and the female people who have merit, and the disabled people who have merit, in favor of the white guys who got there because their brother got them a job. The white guys who got there because they were fluffing Trump on Fox News. The anti-DEI purge is just resegregation. Let's just call it what it is. DEI is just the shortest way for MAGA to spell the N-word. They want all the boardrooms, all the universities, all the CEOs to be white and delightsome. So we're not fooled by this. And some of the corporations are beginning to understand that it ain't go woke, go broke. It's go fash, lose cash. Go fascist, lose cashist. And this can be shown in the results of what has happened to Target versus Costco. Target, of course, for a long time was a leader in being inclusive and offering diversity. They're famous for having pride displays during Pride Month that the right-wingers and the religious fanatics would get all upset about and want to boycott Target because they've got rainbows. Oh my God, rainbows. Nobody's forcing you to buy this stuff, folks. You don't have to buy the rainbow stuff when it's out. So Target caved. Target caved on the DEI thing, so they're going to scale back DEI. They're going to no longer have DEI. And now, for 8 weeks straight, Target has seen a decline in its foot traffic. This is information coming from the website Retail Brew. Target saw foot traffic fall for 8 consecutive weeks, 5.7% down this week compared to last year's this week. That's compared to 7.1% it fell last week, and the average weekly decline over this past 8 weeks has been 6.2%. In their March 4th earnings call, Target reported a 3.1% fourth quarter loss and a sales decline in February. This has been a boycott that has been put together by black clergy, signed on with more than 150,000 people online. They had a goal of 100,000. So DEI is out at Target and their foot traffic is down and their profits are down. Meanwhile, we take a look over at Costco. Costco stood up to the DEI purge and said explicitly, we're all for diversity, equity, and inclusion, like all Americans should be. And since they resisted their demands from Trump to drop their DEI programs, their foot traffic has grown 13 straight weeks. An entire quarter. They have had more people going into Costco day after day. And as someone who does a lot of shopping at Costco, I can confirm this. It's a lot busier at the Costco in Medford, Oregon these days. The same week, March 17th, they had a 5.2% gain in foot traffic over the same week last year, compared to Target dropping 5.7%. So it's clear. It's not go woke, go broke. It's go fash, lose cash. Time for our Boycott Idaho segment, our regular segment telling you why you should avoid the handmade state, and in particular boycott the Idaho potato. No red state is more singularly associated with one single product than Idaho and the potato. They even brag about it on their license plates. So while they continue to discriminate and abuse people of color, gay and lesbian people, and non-religious people, let's let them know that the blue states are no longer going to economically subsidize these regressive red states. Boycott Idaho, boycott the Idaho potato. And we've got an update to a previous story. We had told you a few days ago about a bill that was called SB 1023, the so-called Health Freedom Act, or as I like to call it, the Freedom to Infect Others Act. And what it did is it was going to expand the ban on requiring the COVID-19 vaccine. Already under Idaho law, no business, school, or government entity can mandate that you have a COVID-19 vaccine. This bill, SB 1023, would have broadened that so that no school, business, or government entity could mandate any medical treatment. Nothing. You couldn't require any medical treatment. As the Democratic leader explained, this bill says they can't make you bandage oozing wounds. They can't make you get lice treatments. They can't make you cover your mouth if you have Ebola and you're coughing on people. So this sailed through the Idaho legislature, landed on the desk of Governor Brad Little, who, to his credit, vetoed the bill. So good news, the Freedom to Infect Others law failed at the governor's desk. It was vetoed. However, the supporters are back in the House and the Senate with new bills that are virtually identical to allow businesses and governments to, or forbidding businesses and governments from requiring any medical treatment. But they're going to carve out an exception for schools to be able to send home sick kids. Okay, so if your kid's got the measles, we can send them home. But if you've got the measles, your workplace can't force you to go home. No business or government entity could force you to go home, bandage those wounds or anything. So the freedom to infect others is back, winding its way through the Idaho legislature. We'll keep you posted on that. We also have a new law that expands on another previous law. Back in 2024, Idaho passed Senate Bill 1352, which allows for counselors and therapists to deny treatment, quote, in support of goals, outcomes, or behaviors that conflict with their sincerely held religious, moral, or ethical principles. That's right. Under Idaho law right now, a therapist could reject you if, say, you were trans and wanting to go through transition, and that therapist thought that trans was icky. They can deny you treatment. If you're a gay person and you want to go to couples therapy with your partner, the therapist can deny you treatment because, well, you know, the God doesn't like the gay. If you're a young woman and you want to have some counseling over abortion treatments, perhaps, they can deny you that treatment. They can deny you your counseling. Basically, if your counselor thinks what you're trying to accomplish is something that goes against their morals, not yours, their morals, they can deny you treatment. So, this is now being expanded. The legislature has passed HB 59, the so-called Medical Ethics Defense Act, that extends this right of morality-based discrimination to all healthcare providers. The bill states, quote, Healthcare providers shall have the right of conscience, and pursuant to this right shall not be required to participate in or pay for a medical procedure, treatment, or service that violates such healthcare provider's conscience. End quote. Now, Planned Parenthood has warned that, quote, patients could be denied essential care ranging from birth control to tubal ligation, end quote. And it's not hard to imagine religious providers, of which many hospitals are Catholic-based or religious-based, it's not hard to imagine them denying, say, PrEP treatment for AIDS patients, or birth control for unmarried women, or gender-affirming care for transgender adults. And remember, it's already a felony in Idaho for trans kids to get any such gender-affirming care. They could deny counseling for married people who are in affairs. They could deny administering naloxone for opioid overdoses, or even the wholesale rejection of any treatment for any gay, lesbian, transgender, queer, atheist, liberal, socialist, or Satanist. I've said this many times before throughout my history as a broadcaster and a podcaster. Your religion requires sacrifice from you, not me. If you've got a religion that forbids you from doing certain things, and those certain things are required from the job, then you don't get to have that job. You don't get to be a Muslim bartender and refuse to serve alcohol because alcohol goes against your Muslim beliefs. You don't get to be a vegan waitress at a wings store and not serve chicken wings because you don't eat meat. You don't get to be an Amish electrician and refuse to work on someone's electricity because electricity isn't your thing. If you've got a religion, you have to make sacrifices for it, not me. Time for my radical rant, and this sort of dovetails with our last story about Idaho and its health freedom laws and medical conscience clause laws. And it's a call from me to the Democratic Party to please, as we rebuild this party, as we try to retake our democracy, please, can we get God out of our government? Because one of the things I see from the Democratic talking heads and the people thinking about this is that, oh, we Democrats, we're too dismissive to people of faith. We're too dismissive to people of faith. We need to better embrace people of faith. And I think that is exactly the wrong direction for the Democratic Party to go. The people of faith are Republicans. I say it again, the people of faith are Republicans. Democrats need to be the people of secular democracy. A secular democracy that is welcoming of people of faith, welcoming of people of all faiths. Because that's the problem. The minute you start putting God into government, you got to ask which one. Who's God? Whose interpretation of that God? And the biggest problem with this is you can't subpoena God. We can't get God on the witness stand to testify and swear to himself of what he does and does not like, or what she approves or does not approve of. We have to take some man's word for it. And in legal circles, that's called hearsay. That's why we don't want God in our government. The Democrats need to be moving away from the open embrace of God and Scripture in our government. I listen to a lot of Cory Booker speech, and I love him, and I understand that his faith is important to him. But to hear him and Raphael Warnock going back and forth about Scripture on the floor of my Senate does not make me feel better represented. It's time for the Democrats to understand that we need to be the party of the people, and not all the people are Christian. I completely support your right to religion, to believe whatever you want to believe. And in order for that to work, We have to be a secular society. No more of having chaplains open up our sessions in Congress with prayers. No more of these national prayer breakfasts. Get In God We Trust off our money. Return us back to e pluribus unum. Because I think there's this feeling amongst religious folks that all of us kind of have religion. You know, that, okay, so I'm a Protestant and I believe in God, but a Catholic, he also believes in God. And a Muslim, well, he calls it Allah, but he still believes in God. And Jews, well, they believe in God. They just call him Yahweh, but we all believe in God, right? Wrong. I don't believe in that shit. I find it to be silly and a pointless waste of time. I find it to be a function of the ignorance of humanity before it managed to discover the scientific method to figure out how things worked. It's as silly to me to talk about God parting the Red Sea to help the Jews escape as it is to talk about Apollo riding his chariot across the sky carrying the sun. But I'm fine if you believe that. It's cool if you think that's the way it works. Hell, I'm cool if you think it's Apollo's chariot carrying the sun. At least I can see the sun. I can prove that it exists. But we need to be a country that is accepting of you and your religious belief, and me and my complete lack of a religious belief. And I believe that religious people out there, you just don't even get how ubiquitous religion is all around us. Everywhere I go, I see crosses everywhere. Crosses on buildings, crosses on rocks, crosses on bluffs. There's crosses everywhere, all these symbols of ancient Roman torture devices, everywhere I look. Invocations of God everywhere I go. And the unspoken assumption that because I don't believe in God, I'm somehow immoral. I'm somehow evil. I've heard that so many times from religious folks. Well, if you don't believe in God, what's stopping you from going out and raping and killing and murdering? I don't know, empathy? Basic human decency? A moral framework? What's really telling is the fact that you need a God to keep you from raping and killing and stealing. It seems that implicit in your question is the fact that you would be raping and killing and stealing if there were no God to punish you in the afterlife. That's a bit scary, especially when you're considering people running our government might think things like that. This country is not a Christian nation. It was explicitly founded not to be a religious nation. In our Constitution, no religious tests shall issue for being a part of this government. We have a separation of church and state that was written about quite explicitly by our founding fathers. They understand that it's not to keep the state safe from the church so much as it's to keep the church safe from the state. Because again, once you start mixing God in your government, you got to decide which God. And one of them gets favored and the others don't. The Treaty of Tripoli, signed in the 18th century, explicitly states that the United States was not founded as a Christian nation. Now, there were a lot of Christians among the founders, but not exactly the same kind of Christians as today's Christians. A lot of them were deists. Thomas Jefferson was a deist, someone who believes in God as like a clockmaker. You know, God created the universe, but once the universe exists, it kind of runs on its own. God doesn't have a lot of interference with people. Jefferson used to have a red letter Bible. The red letter Bible is one that letters in red everything that Jesus spoke of or preached. Minus, and then he went and edited it. Jefferson went and edited that to take out all of the supernatural stuff, the walking on water and transmuting water to wine and all that kind of stuff, to just make it a book of Jesus philosophy. I completely support it. The philosophy that is reported in the Bible Do unto others, the meek shall inherit the earth, suffer the little children, let them come unto me. That ye do to the least of me, you've done unto me. Beware the log in one's own eye before you complain about the speck in mine. I'm all about the Jesus. I'm all about that philosophy. I just don't see the need to ascribe anything supernatural to basic human empathy. So let's get God out of our government. Democrats, start working toward being secular. Start promoting the need, the necessity for us to be neutral with respect to religion in our government. It's time to make a distinction. Let MAGA and the Republicans be all about the white and delightsome Christian Jesus. Let our side be the one that accepts the socialist liberal Jesus and the Buddha and the Muhammad and Moses and all the rest of them. We are the inclusive party. Don't push out the atheists and the agnostics by so obviously and demonstratively worshiping your God on my Senate floor.
And it goes down smooth.
Well, that's all the time I've got for you today. Thanks for joining us, and make sure you pass this podcast along to someone else. As you know, this is just my hobby. I'm not going to put a lot of effort into marketing or getting advertisers, but I'll tell you what, if you want to do that for me, I'd really appreciate it. In fact, if you find me advertisers, I'm willing to split the money with you. Really, I'll hire you on as my freelance advertising salespeople. You find me an advertiser, I'll split the revenue with you. How's that? Anyway, The Radical Russ Show is produced, directed, researched, written, recited, posted, and catered by me, Radical Russ Belville, and governed by Creative Commons share-alike licensing. My main theme is We Love the Herb by Herbal Nation, and interstitial music is by freestockmusic.com and VTEMO, courtesy of freetouse.com/music. You can contact me by email at radicalruss@gmail.com, call my message line at 877-RUSS-420, that's 877-877-420, and reach me on social media on Blue Sky as radicalruss.com and nowhere else. Oh, and before we go, I did want to forget this thing for my post-credits scene. The filibuster, or the floor speech that Cory Booker put out there. Somebody had made the comment that Cory Booker is holding the Senate floor like a combination of Jimmy Stewart in Mr. Smith Goes to Washington and Jerry Lewis in the last hours of his telethon. Compelling viewing. And I laughed at that, and then I stopped and thought for a second, you know, there's a whole cohort of adults now in the United States who have no idea what a Jerry Lewis telethon is. Oh my God, we have to explain what a Jerry Lewis telethon was for muscular dystrophy. You know, that was something I always loved as a kid. Me and my friends, boy, we used to, every Labor Day weekend that would come around, we would have a sleepover. And the goal was to stay up all night and all day and watch the 22 or 23, 24 hours, however long it was, of the entire Jerry Lewis telethon. So imagine a bunch of white, 10, 11, 12-year-old boys staying up late to catch, Steve and Edie Gourmet, or, we gotta stay up late to catch Sammy Davis Jr. or something, right? It was a weird time, folks. We only had 3 channels and no internet. There wasn't a lot to watch. Okay, you can support this podcast financially by donating to Radical Russ on Venmo, Rad Russ on Cash App, or via PayPal on my website at radicalruss.com. Get this podcast on Spotify, Apple Music, my website, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening, and until next time, take care of each other.
About the plan the mother has grown. This time around, if you haven't heard, we love it. You plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you